My name is Juri Love. I'm your host. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today I have a guest. She's from Phoenix, Arizona. Before I introduce my guest, I want to introduce you to my book, which is A Gift from University. Same title as this podcast. This is available on Amazon, and the subtitle is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. I wrote this book and published in 2020. And after I published my book, I got a lot of feedback and people messaging me that they are also the survivor of child sex abuse, domestic violence, homelessness, etc. I felt very compelled to create a platform where it's safe for people to talk about adversity and difficult conversations. I started this podcast at the beginning of this year, and I'm very, very grateful for all the guests who came from all over the world. And today is not an exception. I really am honored to have tonight's guest. Hi, Gail. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Gail, can you tell our audience who you are and where you're located and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Gayle Lynn, and I am located in Phoenix, Arizona, and I am a relationship coach. My website is relationshipsevolving.com.
And do you have any social media, Instagram as well,
I
Facebook?
do. Yeah, absolutely. I am on Facebook, so it's Relationships Evolving with Gayle Lynn. Or if you want to friend me, it would actually be under Gayle Lynn Marsh. And I have also a women's group that we do strategies and advice for relationship, and that's called Relationships Evolving Women Supporting Women. I'm on Instagram at relationships_evolving. And yeah, I think I got them all.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So, Gail, can you please tell our audience what was your adversity?
Well, it's so interesting. It's like we're on this spiritual journey, having this human experience. And it seems like it's part of the game that we play is to have some kind of adversity that we come up against. And for me, it was kind of a double whammy. Um, I had a son who was an addict for 10 years, and he ended up getting into heroin. And so I had to travel that journey along with the reason why I became a relationship coach is because in my own relationship, my husband came to me and expressed his desire to have sex with somebody else. And that sent me into basically the closet crying because at this point I'm dealing with my children, my son who had recently overdosed, and we had to do CPR, bring him back to life. And the way my husband was actually dealing with the stress is like wanting more sex. I was actually checking out because, I was worried about my son and baby bird. And so my energy was focused on that along with the businesses that we owned. And so all of a sudden it's like everything is coming at me, and I'm like, I don't know how to deal with this. I especially didn't know how to deal with my husband wanting to have sex with somebody else. That was like the thing that really upset my apple cart in my world because it rocked all my beliefs. The beliefs that from the church, one man, one woman. It was also just you know uh, having this idea that we'll be married forever. And so all of a sudden this is starting to come at me, and then we get farther down into the journey, and I it was like everything was being stripped from me. Everything that I knew, every piece of like even being a mother of an addict, of trying to deal with that whole space, along with trying to deal with my relationship. And then it started to get, you know, started to work through some things. But as we also started to work through things, and it's like the universe decided to really send me into this dark night where I also ended up having to walk away from my job for ethical reasons. So then I lost my identity through my corporate job that I used to have. I then also my husband and I, not because he wanted to have sex with somebody else, but for other reasons, we chose to get a divorce. So now I'm losing my identity as a wife. And to top it off, my son ended up dying from the overdose. Um, so it was like all in one swoop. All these identities were being lost, and now I am faced with having to figure out who I am, and feeling just like I've been completely brought down to my knees because who am I? What am I doing here? Why am I here?
I am so sorry, and especially the loss of your son. How long ago was this?
That was actually not that long ago. That was only like 7 months ago.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How old was he?
He was 27. He would have been 28 a month later. So, yeah. And it was, dealing with everything that happened with him. It was not just the addiction, but also he was sex trafficked. And so having to deal with that and realizing all the pain and everything that he was going through, it just kind of, it drops you to like, what happened? Where did we go wrong? Um, all of these things start flooding in, and it gets to be pretty intense because it's a big level of grief to go through. Grief for that, grief for even having the divorce, even though we're really good friends and we get along and we chose to do it for very good reasons. It's still a process of grieving that life that you had for so many years, that, because now the universe is saying, okay, who are you going to trust? Is it the marriage you're going to trust, or is it something more?
So let's dissect a little bit. You mentioned a little bit about sex trafficking.
Yeah. So my son, we ended up having somebody that we knew. We thought he was a really good friend. Take our son after one of his overdoses, and he was going to take him under his wing. He said he had a way that he knew he could help him, and that his brother was an addict, and so as a mother, I was like taken back that somebody would care about my son in such a way that they would help us to work through this recovery. Well, then, as we found out, he was actually using him and giving him drugs in place of having sex with other men. And so it was sex trafficking, and we had no ideas. We had a friend contact us and say, hey, something's not right. And so we went down there and we were able to pull him out of that situation. However, there was so much more now that he had to deal with, that we had to deal with as a family, to start breaking this down. And he was actually doing really good. He was clean for 154 days. And this guy contacted him again, and he knew how to press the buttons because he's an addict, you know, and he lured him out to do it again. And this time it was worse. And we believe that our son just couldn't take the pain, the physical pain, after we saw what was in the text messages. the physical pain along with the emotional pain of what had happened to him. And he started using again. And, he got something that had fentanyl in it, and he hadn't been using. And so it didn't take much before he overdosed. And we don't think he did it on purpose. We think he was just trying to numb out the pain, the physical and emotional pain.
I am very, very sorry. I don't know what to say to you. And thank you so much for sharing the story on this platform, um, and be brave. I think a lot of people, especially mom, like the kids are going through this mental health crisis and addictions and stuff. Sometimes we feel even embarrassed to talk about it. And then sometimes it's too late to get help. And one of the reasons why I wanted to create this kind of platform is to really get rid of this stigma. It's okay to talk about it, and then it is really significantly important that you are telling the truth. And how about your husband, ex-husband at this point? Um, when he came to you, a lot of times infidelity happens without telling the partner. They just do it, and you find out later. I've had that many times, and it's disgusting. And then their sexual partner contacted me a couple of times. So, sometimes, as bad as it is, it's really like having that open communication from him. I know it was shocking, but how did you feel, maybe versus if he didn't tell you and did it?
Well, first of all, for me, it meant so much more that he actually did come to me rather than finding out that he did cheat on me. And I do believe that he didn't cheat on me. I do believe that he expressed his desires. Um, However, that didn't change the way I felt. Like my self-worth, it's like, okay, I've been by you for this long. Um, you know, why am I not good enough? Why do you need to, and I had to start working through all of those things along with, now my safety and security was wrapped up in that relationship, thinking that, this is how I'm going to be taken care of. This is my home. This is, my nest for all my babies. And that felt threatened. And so, when we start having to work through those base, abandonment things, it starts to also bring up the trauma from the past where you realize, oh, this goes deeper than just this. Like this is coming. The reason why I have this reaction is because there's something also that happened in my childhood that created, that space where I'm feeling abandoned. And so a lot of stuff has surfaced, and it's still, I through life, this is a journey. So some of that stuff still surfaces. And so, we just take care of it as we need to.
Do you know what happened, that in the childhood contributed those surfaces you mentioned about what came up?
Well, it's interesting because some of it I'm still uncovering, or shall I say, I'm not uncovering. It's when it's wanting to be revealed, it's being revealed. And I, like last year, there was just a small piece that I found out, and I don't think my parents really knew better, but I asked my mom what was going on with me, with her while when she was pregnant with me. And it was interesting because she said, "Oh, we were building the house, and we used to call you Missy." And I said, "Well, why would you call me Missy? Like I thought that was the name of our dog, right? So why are you calling me Missy?" And she goes, "Oh, for mistake." And I didn't realize how profound of an effect that something that 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 you don't really think about how that impacts you even in the womb. And so, like, I was coming out really not feeling wanted in the first place. Um, but then also finding different experiences that I experienced through my childhood where, they were just simple things where my parents weren't around and I was in the hospital. And at that time, they didn't allow them to like stay the night, like now we can stay the night with our family members and do all that. It wasn't like that. It was like you're in a crib and you have this thing over you. So you're basically caged up like an animal. And, just those little things where a child feels completely abandoned because they don't understand where their family went. It seems so benign, but it impacts you in such a huge way. And then, when I say there's other things that are slowly revealing themselves, there's a lot that I don't remember about my childhood. And so I'm still allowing a space for that to come up if it needs to come up, because I know that there's some things that are kind of still stopping me in life that I need that breakthrough on.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that. And sometimes when you are in a womb, I've heard there's memory, and then the birth. I didn't even know that every birthday I felt really suffocated, and then every birthday I wanted to have this this kind of weird feeling of death. And then my mom later on told me when I was getting pushed, it was really long labor because the umbilical cord was wrapped around, or like no, if he was pushing too long, and I was like I came out like really white and then like suffocated. So I'm like,
Ah,
wow, maybe that is like because my
wow.
me, so
Yeah.
I didn't even know until
Oh,
later. Like,
that's interesting because that happened with my youngest son. Like they were like, you need to push him out now.
mm.
And I wonder if that had an effect on him through his life. I'm going to have to ask him because
No,
that's,
yeah, yeah, but I think every body has sort of subconscious memory from the childbirth in the womb, and then obviously childhood and stuff.
yeah.
So yeah, what you said was interesting. And then so how is it going with your husband right now? Like, so you're divorced,
So
and then
we are, yeah, we are divorced, and we're still business partners, and we really chose. There was just this space that we started to go into when he came to me, and where we had to start working through all of this stuff. Where do we start? What do we do? It was really trying to get into those spaces. Um, and some of it was we were very enmeshed with each other. And so part of it for us was really breaking down like who we were, because we had been together. And I mean, we worked together, we worked in the same house together, we did business together. So there wasn't very many times during a day that we would actually be um, apart. And maybe if he was out working or doing something, and sometimes then I was even with them. So we were really enmeshed, and there was just this space and time where we both had opportunities to go on some different adventures. And so we decided that it would be best if we were actually divorced and wanted to work through that process. And so we did. And it's been good. It's been good for me because I'm figuring out who I am, like really getting into my authentic self, and um, seeing the world differently and experiencing it differently. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And he is getting the same things, and yet we still support each other. Mm.
so I married and then divorced twice, and then marriage is very very difficult. It's especially like somebody like myself who was experienced with the extreme trauma, and then sexual abuse and all this identity crisis and not knowing my value. and then attracting these abusive relationships or even breaking the relationship that might be healthy. And you know, sometimes these kind of events in your life, um, as hard as it is, it's kind of a awakening, like wake up calls. And I'm very sorry that happened to you. And then I want to ask you a question, as woman to woman. And somebody, I'm from Japan, but you're raised in America. I'm 45 right now, but in our beliefs in Japan, for instance, my question is that in Japan, women were trained to be a wife, and then there's this word called tsukusu, which is devotion. So you devote your life to men. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes my mom generations, my grandma generations, they just serve men, and then they are trained to go to cooking class or sewing class and to be the best wife. But then they don't have much voice once they get into a really bad relationship that they can't get out because of this beliefs of devotion and your value. It's not like you are validated without a man, without a marriage. And that is a huge society pressure in Japan. At a certain age, if you are not married, you're not worthy or you're not like a loser kind of.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure in America how you're raised. Maybe if you kind of sit back and take back those kind of maybe bias brainwash kind of beliefs had some impact or effect, what would you say?
Oh, there's still some impact. Definitely not as strong as yours. Like your culture is much more tight around that. Uh, here it's you still have that instilled through the movies, through um, society, through especially through religion. Like the one man, one wife. Um, you should be staying together until death do you part. I mean, it's in the things that we say when we choose to get married. And so the nice thing here in the States is we don't have the pressure like you guys do. There is ways that we can, really, and that's what I kind of do is I work with people on reprogramming their beliefs so that they can actually get down to, well, what do you believe? That's what your mom and your grandpa and ancestors, that's what culture is telling you. But what do you really believe deep down inside? Like, who are you? And that's where the beauty's at, is when you can really start putting on your authentic self and say, no, this is what I'm going to believe.
I see.
And and then being brave enough to actually be that.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you again for sharing your adversity on this platform. And let's move on to the second question, which is the tools that you use to overcome these challenges. This is my favorite part of the podcast, which every single guest has a completely different tools that they use to overcome, not just seeing a counselor like the people usually say, oh, you are going through a hardship, just find a counselor, but that's not that easy. And I've tried many different modalities. So in your case, you have several different layers of traumas and adversities. What's the best tools that you use to overcome those challenges?
Well, the tools, definitely having family and friends that support, right? That's huge. And can also be hard because everybody has their own beliefs, and how you should take care of it. So for like, as far as around my husband's desires and um, trying to address those, we started tackling that because that's actually affecting our core family part. So we needed to really take a look. And so we started out by amping up the intimacy between just us. and because I was in mom mode, I was in business mode, and life in the bedroom was definitely not there. And he had never been with anybody else. Oftentimes, especially in the States, people kind of have those experiences when they're younger before they get married. For him, he didn't have that. And so we did the up in the intimacy. We did like things like orgasmic meditation, and things where we could really get in touch with our bodies, and just in touch with that sexual part of ourselves again. However, the desire didn't go away. And so then I just like, okay, well, let's figure this out. What does this look like? How could we do this and make this work? And so then one of the tools that we actually used was sacred sexuality. And that was a place for us where we could actually go into like a container where there was it was actually a lot of self-development, but it was also a lot of intimate exercises. You're not having sex with people or anything like that, but you are having very intimate exercises. And we chose to do it with other people other than between us, because that was like us having this ability to see, well, what would it like to be with other people? And we're actually in a room where I can see him with another woman and he can see me with another man. So it was definitely, I mean, we put it to the pressure test, just put it that way. And then from there, after we were actually done with that week, we actually chose to open up our relationship and start seeing other people, which sent us on a whole nother mess of trying to figure out still, how do you do this? The communication circles and the talking and it was like a part-time job, just trying to talk through all of these different things and how we wanted to do this. And so we kept doing, we did different things, like we did Landmark and we do this workshop and that workshop. And it was actually a combination of a little bit of everything. It was like, it's like the universe kind of guides you down different steps. When you go on a journey, it's like things will come out. They come up in front of you. And if you recognize it, you can take those opportunities and use them to your advantage. And so, it was from finding all of these different tools and the friends and, people who have had these experiences that we could talk to, that allowed us to be able to form what we really wanted for our relationship. And so from all of that, that's why I do what I did, because I had to go in all of these different areas and figure out, well, how do I deal with my emotions? How do we communicate? What is this anxious attachment style that's showing up in our lives, and how do we deal with that? Oh, one of us is avoidant. So I took all of that, everything, all my knowledge, all my coaching certification, and wrapped it up so that now I'm able to help other people in those areas. So that's how we dealt with that area.
How about your son?
That was always a journey. That was a lot of prayers, really a lot of learning, how to not be codependent, because a lot of this was showing us how in our relationships, how to not be codependent, how to draw boundaries, and through the things that we were also learning through the whole sexual desire stuff, we were able to take a lot of those same tools and be able to apply them to dealing with our son. But that was a tough one, because it was on and off. He was in our lives, out of our lives. How much do you give when he asks for something? And so it was a lot of reading and a lot of relying on some outside sources to be able to, help us in those areas. But that was a tough one to deal with. I don't know, it's so hard. How do you deal with that? Yeah.
I'm yeah, I'm thankful that you're sharing a lot of tips about relationships, and then as far as your son and then his addiction and loss, it's just so heartbreaking. And um how are you coping yourself right now? You said you are finding your identity. Like, is there any tools that you can share with your audience at this point for yourself, not for your clients?
What can I share for myself or in general of how to deal with it?
I mean,
For
how are you keeping yourself up as far as your mental health and then, your identity, well-being? What is the tools that you're using
yeah,
to take care of yourself?
yeah. So for me, I give myself a lot of grace. Um, if I have a day where I am just shut down because grief hits a new level, I give myself permission to just be whatever I'm going to be that day. If it's a puddle on my bed, I'm going to be a puddle on my bed and not feel like I have to push through it. So for me, I need that space, and then getting into the water. For me, it's water. Some people, that's my nature, is getting into the pool and being in touch and feeling, you know, the water completely surround me. It's like a blanket for me. And uh, and allowing my emotions. That's the thing that I learned through all of this is feel. People don't want to feel, and it's the most important thing that we can do. That's why we're here, is to understand these feelings, the feelings of grief, the feelings of happiness. What is it like to be happy? You don't know unless you've been sad. um, so really allowing myself to feel. And if I need to go through a box of Kleenex, I go through a box of Kleenex. I don't deny myself that feeling. And I I find more and more, and these are one of the techniques that you have, but if you're just willing to sit with that emotion and feel it, it'll usually go away fairly fast. And it's when we push it and we're like, no, I don't have time for you right now. And then we discover we start stuffing it, and then we start getting sick and, you know, stuff like that. And that's, I don't desire that. That's not another journey I want to go on. So for me, it is really allowing that space. So more self-care than I've had to do in my entire life. I can say that.
Well, I'm glad that you are recognizing those feelings and allowing yourself to be, those days that you just, kind of check out. So I want to share with you and with our audience that because of the disability of my child sex abuse and domestic violence, that have I had no help or no language to understand what it was. My coping mechanism growing up was completely to numb myself and then
Mhm.
not feel. And
Yeah.
so if something happens for like a week or even like a year, I don't feel anything. And then sometimes it just comes up suddenly and I can't sleep or whatever. I had some sexual assault and then sexual harassment cases like maybe 2, 3 years ago. And I didn't even know that was a crime, or I didn't even know that was harassment until I started to share with my close friends. And then, oh my gosh, that is a crime. Oh my gosh, that's a harassment. And that's how bad it is. Like, I can't feel.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is so important to me. First of all, you have to recognize you're angry or you're offended. And then, second thing is to be able to voice it. And this, not only understand it, but to be able to voice it and nurture it.
Hmm.
That is a process.
It
And
is
that
a
takes,
process.
yeah, and it takes courage to do that.
Yeah. Because we're taught to stuff our feelings. It's especially in some cultures, or even I think men even more so. And so when that happens, uh, it creates a lot of disease.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And then I want to move on to the last question, which is a gift that came from your adversity. So, how would you say a gift that came from this adversity?
The gift for me is being able to be a relationship coach and to be able to help others along this path. If somebody's coming up with these kind of desires and relationship stuff, or just relationships in general, that's my gift. So that's my gift of coming back. So it was like my hero's journey where my apple cart was upset. I had to go out, go on this adventure, find out who I was, and then slay those dragons and be able to come back and bring it back. And so that's my biggest gift as far as what I'm doing. And, with the gift that Tyler gave me, I mean, there's just so many things. I'm sorry. I don't know if I can go into it too much, but I can tell now he's even supporting me. And probably even more so, I feel his support in my life, even though he's not on this physical plane. He was always my biggest supporter. And I'm just glad he didn't have to go through what he was going through.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. It's a good thing. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
And if I can make a difference by telling my story,
Mm-hmm.
that's the gift right there. Because if it can help change one person or help one addict see that it's not worth it, that's what counts.
Absolutely. Well, Gayle, thank you so much for your story, being brave, and sharing my podcast. And as a mother of two children, like I know her, and I'm grateful that you're here to share. And my last thing that I always ask for my guests is, what if somebody's listening to a podcast and then that person is going through what you went through? What's the biggest advice that you can give?
The biggest advice I can give is to really drop into yourself and begin to find you, because everybody else is telling you who to be and how to be. And so take some time. Don't rush into things. Um, Come to who you really want to be and what you want to be in this world and what you really desire, not what everybody else says.
Well, thank you so much again for sharing your story and then sharing your time. And all my guests who came to my podcast, I really appreciate them. And then especially you and then your son, who gave you courage to speak. Um, and I just want to really ground myself and appreciate you and your time. This has been my vision to share our diversity in this platform. So thank you so much again for being a part of this movement and part of the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And then we have more guests coming on, I guess, my diversity coming up this month, next month, and then October as well. So look forward to that. Thank you again, everyone.